Hi folks, welcome to your Planning Outlook. This updated on Tuesday the 10th of November. We've got a changeable weather sequence as we go onwards through the rest of this week and the weekend. Temperatures often on the mild side, but will be varied. There will be some chillier days in there as well, where freezing levels will dip onto the higher mountains with some snow falling occasionally on the Munros, but nothing really sustained at this stage, and milder spells perhaps the more common of the next 10-day period or so. Windy conditions as southwesterlies do prevail, gales at times, bringing the wettest of conditions onto the western mountains. We'll start off with a look at temperatures. This is one of the technical charts that we look at in forecasting off one of the computer models, and this shows you the 850 millibar level. If you're familiar with these videos, you'll know we show these quite a bit to give you the feel for the temperatures on the higher levels. It's what gives us that steer for the mountain top temperatures. Look at the number on the white background. That's the height in what we call decameters. Add a zero, you've got it in meters. We do just like to complicate things for the sake of it, I think, sometimes. This is the sequence then. This is through the rest of Wednesday as a cold front is going eastwards and chillier air just moves in from the west as we go through into Thursday. Temperatures at or just below freezing point on the very highest tops in Scotland. As we go onwards into Thursday night, temperature will tend to lift again for a time as the frontal system comes through, but the next cold front is arriving from the west, the boundary that you can see there as the colours change into the bluer tones, and that brings a lowering of freezing level once again into Friday, and that's showing temperatures around 1300 metres of -1 or -2, so some snow and some hail back onto the Munros. Friday night into Saturday, and milder air comes in behind the warm front, and Saturday is then generally a milder day with above zero temperatures to the highest tops. And then the next cold front comes in as we go onwards into Sunday, and we're back to square one like Friday with values at around -2 or so on the higher Scottish mountains, perhaps even a little bit colder if that air mass does indeed come around from a colder source off the North Atlantic. It's short-lived though, because as we go onwards into the early part of next week, it's likely that the southwesterly milder air stream is once again back with us, and that might just prevail for a few days early next week. A real classic back and forth pattern when it comes to Atlantic west or southwesterlies at this time of year. Here's the synoptic charts then. That's Wednesday, a low pressure system which lies out toward the west with some fronts draping their way in across Ireland and getting into western Scotland where rain will set in, particularly across south and southwestern facing mountains. Generally drier the further north and northeast you go. That rain getting into the western coasts of Wales and Cumbria, but really I think late in the day before too much of anything shows up across more Pennine areas. The winds up to gale force, even severe gale force, ahead of those fronts on that general southerly flow. Now, Wednesday's weather system will have moved fairly smartly away eastwards into Thursday, and a bump of high pressure comes in from the west to give a decent day for many places. 1 or 2 showers may just be left behind early on. Watching for things deteriorating though around the west and northwest of Scotland. Coastal hills likely to fill in with the next weather system with some drizzle and some low cloud as that drifts in off the Atlantic. So here going downhill and something a bit more persistent in terms of rain around the west coast developing. Further east across the Highlands, generally a dry story, and overall a clearer, brighter picture than we've seen earlier in the week, with a fresher air mass coming around off the Atlantic, so less hazy, visibility better for most, and the cloud base generally that bit higher. Still a rather brisk wind and strengthening as the day goes on, but not as strong as Wednesday. A cold front goes eastwards, and it's a chilly southwesterly on Friday as we saw earlier, and a wind again that's gale or severe gale force across the mountains of northern and western Scotland through Friday. Showery conditions merging at times into something a bit more constant. Snow and some hail, particularly on the Munros, more like rain at the lowest slopes, coming in most frequently across those western and northwestern parts of the Highlands. A scattering of showers elsewhere across western hills of England and Wales, but some drier and some sunnier spells and clearer conditions in terms of visibility than we've seen in some recent days. Southwesterlies prevail on Saturday, a ripple of fairly weak fronts across the south of Britain. The next system's just drifting in off the Atlantic over Ireland into western Scotland, where low cloud and some rain and some drizzle comes on associated with that next warm front. patchy rain and low cloud, maybe just developing around the Irish Sea coast, but not generally coming to a great deal. Driest, brightest conditions the further east and northeast you go through the day on Saturday. Just watch the Western Highlands for filling in with low cloud, rain and drizzle around those fronts. The winds, again, rather blustery, could well be gale force across the higher mountains, especially in Scotland. Stays on the windy side into Sunday. By this stage, the next chillier air mass has come in from the west, and once again, it's a story of being back to some snow and some hail on the higher mountains in Scotland at least, and maybe even the highest tops in England and Wales. Frequent precipitation across western Scotland, showery conditions coming into Snowdonia and across into the lakes and Pennines, and that significant wind chill to go with it. So nothing particularly settled about the forecast in the days ahead. Often those windy conditions just staying with us, and I think that might well be the tale into early next week as well. Just notice the little area of low pressure which is right toward the bottom of this chart. It's located sort of between the Canaries and the Azores. That's a subtropical storm. It's got tropical characteristics essentially, and it's one of those that at this time of year does just tend to circulate around in this part of the world. It can just go nowhere for many days, but eventually those sorts of features can just get drawn in our direction and create some complications basically for the longer range forecast, and it all depends on whether a low that's over the North Atlantic scoops it up and drags it into the mix. If it does, it can just enhance the fairly unsettled conditions that we get, which is what this modelling is trying to show as we go into the early part of next week. Overall, it's that mild south-southwesterly fetch to the windy pattern, still some rain at times to start next week, and a trail of a front attached back to that subtropical feature that tries to get drawn towards us around Tuesday. Much uncertainty just what happens with that very small scale feature. Some indications starting then to favour a building of pressure and maybe just that little low almost breaking apart into the middle of the week. Much to play for, I think, at this distance. Some just hints, I suppose, of a general build of pressure for something a bit quieter, but much hinges on that former little tropical low. So we shall keep an eye on all of that. Stay up to date with your local forecasts every day on the MWIS website. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.